So, our next piece of African art, again, that's unit number 6, will be the portrait mask, Mblo, Mblo, which you can see up here at the top of the screen. And it's by the Ballet people who live in the Ivory Coast, so West Africa. And this is an early 20th century piece, so early 1900s. And these are the two images right here for College Board, the actual wooden and brass mask. And then the photograph of the piece, more of a contextual kind of showing of who the mask is a portrait of, and then who would wear the mask. So we'll talk about that with the next few slides. So for this mask, we do have an artist, and it is one of I put the artist's name here, the performer whose name is not given, but it's her stepson. And this mask is in the likeness of the woman named Moya Yanso, who is right here. And so this is depicting an actual individual, a person. And that is an important, very important note to make. So we do know our artist, Owe Kimo, and our performer is the stepson. Although the original performer who would wear this mask was her late husband. So he commissioned the art piece, her late husband, and it was worn by him and then later worn by her stepson here. And in fact, we know that Moya Yanso herself wore the mask until she was physically unable to do that. So Moya, this lovely lady right here, she was a very famous dancer of the ballet people and was known as a phenomenal dancer. And so we are honoring her with this mask and the wearing of the mask. So let's move on a little bit to talk about the mask, and then we'll talk about the performance. Some of the characteristics I wrote down on the left, we have an oval face, which you can see a lot of geometry here. A long nose, again, incredibly geometric. Downcast eyes, meaning they're looking down, not directly necessarily at you. So there's a symbolic sense of modesty that the mask is conveying, which is a characteristic that they would value. A small open mouth right here, which is commonly associated with intelligence. Signs of age, so your folds and lines that you get on the sides of your mouth and your nose. Throughout history, age has always been associated with wisdom. We have scarification patterns throughout. And then we have brass plates that are attached to the mask. You can see the triangles on the cheeks and the forehead. And when the mask is worn and the individual is dancing, you might have the light reflecting off the brass, and that would be a great symbol of health and well-being. And then projecting pieces at the top here, you can see the lines incised in for hair. And these projections up at the top, we don't think they're hair, but merely decorative. And you can see it on a number of these types of masks, which I'll show you at the end, that they are most likely just decorative. But this is definitely an abstract face, an abstract representation of this woman, but is the ideal of her. It's her at her prime. It is capturing her beauty, her inner beauty, the characteristics they admire of her. And it is worn in this performance that is meant to be a great tribute to her. So let's talk a little bit about the performance. Now, this image is not a College Board image, but I loved it because you can see it more in the contextual performance aspect. So the mask here is worn in a masquerade. Now it's GBA, Gaba Gaba, which is the masquerade itself, where dancers, in her case, her husband, and she herself has performed it, and now her stepson, would perform in costume, and the mask would conceal the wearer's face. And these kinds of masquerades were secular, meaning not associated with religion. And the masks would be unveiled and revealed to an audience. The audience would be there, as you can see in the image, at the high point of the performance. And we think these performances were used or were done in celebrations of certain events. It might have been a social gathering, just a way to establish community and honor those important and notable people in their community. It also could have been a way for them to connect to their ancestry, and their ancestors. Um, there are a number of reasons why they might have been performed. But that I thought was a great picture. So you can see the celebratory uh, audience, enjoying the performance. You can see the costuming, the mask, and the projections above it. So I thought this was a really interesting picture for you. And then you watched the Khan Academy, or you should have already watched the Khan Academy video on this female or Mblo mask, which represents the ideal woman, versus the portrait Mblo mask that we are talking about right now, which is a specific woman, our beautiful dancer Moya Yanso. So that difference is incredibly important. The ideal woman, just women in general, versus a specific woman who they are honoring and making a tribute to. That is something just to definitely make note of. And remember, with masks in general, masks really take on their power and their full meaning when they are performed. When they're in a home being stored, or when they are not being worn, or when they are in a museum because they've been sold and traded or taken by missionaries and Christian powers. Whenever it is not being performed and worn by a performer, it doesn't have the meaning that it has when it is worn and performed in the masquerade or the dance or whatever that might be. And that is consistent with all the masks here that we're looking at and will look at in Unit 6, African Art. That's an important thing to know. When you're seeing it like this, in a picture like this, or seeing it in a glass case in a museum, it doesn't have the power that it had when it was being performed. So great pieces, interesting pieces, and please, again, keep them straight in terms of what they represent. But we have just finished up. Oh, here's some examples, too, of some other kinds of Mblo masks, and really have a common type of facial features and characteristics, but all different as well, because they are representing different unique individuals. And the practice stopped around the 1980s. They still have performances, but this particular type of performance where you are honoring a particular individual was stopped around the 1980s. So thanks. Hope that helped you understand more of the portrait masks. And again, remember, these two images here are the ones that you'll have to recognize for the College Board 250.